Page 526.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When darkness veils His lovely face, I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. His oath is cup His blood, support me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, He's in His all my hope and stay. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When He shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I in Him be found, dressed in His righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand.
Amen. I love that song because it reminds us who it is we're relying on. Page 772. $772.
Somebody else. It was 7-2.
Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing His mercy and His grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, He'll prepare us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing there will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sign. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of Him in glory, will the toils of life repay. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Before we do the last verse, is that throwing y'all off that I'm not singing the chorus right?
Yeah.
Is it?
What do you mean?
Well,
I'm singing the harmony because that's the way I like to do it. Is that messing y'all up? All right.
On the chord? No, it's just before the chord.
I hope it's not messing you up. That's just the way I like to do it. All right. Onward to the prize before us. Soon His beauty will behold. Soon the pearly gates will open. We shall tread the streets of gold. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing there will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Amen. Well, I appreciate y'all letting me get away with that. All right, page 774, and then we'll get into our lesson. It's a short one tonight, so looking forward to that trumpet. I don't know about y'all, but I am.
Amen.
When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, and time shall be no more, and the morning breaks eternal, bright and fair. When the saints of earth shall gather over on the other shore, and the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. When the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. When the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. When the roll is called of thunder, when the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. On that bright and cloudless morning, when the dead in Christ shall rise, and the glory of His resurrection share. When His chosen ones shall gather to their home beyond the skies, and the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. When the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. When the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. When the roll is called of thunder, when the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. Let us labor for the pasture from the dawn to setting sun. Let us talk of all His wondrous love and care. Then when all of life is over and our work on earth is done, and the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. When the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. When the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there. When the roll is called of thunder, when the roll is called of thunder, I'll be there.
See, I did it again, didn't I?
For no more people that we have in here, it always seems like we sound pretty good.
Well, I record this, and I'll be honest, I go back a lot of times just listening to music. I don't care nothing about hearing me talk. I like to go back and listen to y'all because you don't know how good y'all come up on the camera. Y'all sound like we've got triple in here what's in here.
Right.
And that's why I get so, I get wound up, and I love it. Y'all just don't know how, yeah. It gets me ready to talk about Jesus when y'all sing like that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As Brother Gary would say, thank y'all for the good singing.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Brother Gary would say. All right, we're in Genesis chapter 33. I was wondering where that was.
Oh.
Genesis chapter 33. Thank you. You know, now that right there is the best example of our marriage. It don't matter what it is. If we're driving down the road and I'll say, honey, look at that Studebaker yonder. About 10 seconds later, she'll turn, and by then it's gone. You know.
It's got to register in my brain first, and then I
I'm not making fun. I've come to love that about her, but she does have a delayed reaction in everything she does.
I think about it before I do it.
Praise God. Praise God.
Oh, hey, that made my day. Thank you. I appreciate it. I've teased her over the years for being like that, but you know what? I've come to love that about her. She just, if you want to show her something, you better start early. She's not going to see it.
You might ought to go on with the.
Yeah. We can go to 32 or 33. Back up.
Well, you know what? I get teased a lot for backing up, so here's what we'll do. We're going to be in chapter 33. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background on where we were. We're not going to read backwards. I think you'll all remember this anyway. As Jacob's getting ready to meet his brother Esau, as he's getting closer to the time when they're going to run into one another finally, you'll remember he has separated out his company and he sent 5 groups ahead of him with different gifts to give his brother. And so when you get to, well, the night before, he's going to meet his brother. He comes to a river, a little river called Jacob. Jacob means to wrestle. So it's probably named later for this event. But anyway, he stays on that side of the river, probably to be alone with God. And God shows up. And there's a pretty good little wrestling match there. And I'll be real honest with you, nobody fully understands this passage. Nobody. I can't find anybody who claims to really understand what happens here. But I can tell you this, there's a picture here of the way we sometimes wrestle with God. When really all we ought to do is just trust Him and let Him lead, let Him guide. Now, I understand why Jacob does all that he's done. God has already appeared to him. He's shown him an angelic host. He's blessed him. He's proved himself to Jacob to the point that Jacob really ought to just trust God. But sometimes it just, as hard-headed as we are as people, sometimes God just has to continually show us that He's with us for us to really get it and really trust Him. And so I think that Jacob was fine with certain aspects of his life and seeing that God had done these things for him. But when he gets this word about Esau coming with 400 men, well, he gets all up in the air again. Have you ever meet anybody? Sometimes it just seems like they're on a roller coaster ride. Man, they're, 1 minute they're up here and everything's great. Next thing they're down in the dumps, and they're back up here and they're back down there. And I can be honest with you, I've been there, okay? I've done that too. You look at people like Elijah, they did it too. You know, Elijah's on Mount Carmel and he's calling down fire from God, and it's licking the water out of the trench and it's burning up the sacrifice. And the next thing you know, it's like, I don't even want to live anymore, God. There's just no use for me. You know, it's just, we all do it. Some of us more than others, but we all do it. And I think Jacob, he does believe God. He does trust God. He's served God most of his life. You know, he was the kid that stayed home and followed mom and daddy and helped and tried to do things right and didn't run off and try to just think about himself. I mean, he'd always been a pretty good kid. He'd been a pretty decent man. He'd pulled a few tricks here and there, but we all mess up, you know. But for the most part, Jacob had been a good guy. Well, now here he comes. He's avoided Laban and God, and this just drives me bananas. God had appeared to Laban in a dream and told him, don't you do anything out of the way to my servant Jacob. And then Laban tells Jacob that. And so Jacob knows, hey, here again, God is with me. God is protecting me. God's taking care of me. And then he finds out there's 400 men coming with Esau, and he panics again. So while he's standing on that side of the river, I think the conversation he's having with God is something like this. I think he's saying, God, I know you've been with me in the past. And I know you're going to bless me. You have. You've given me all these kids. That don't mean I'm not going to die tomorrow. How do I know you're not going to fulfill your promise in them and let me die? I mean, you got to show me, God, you're with me now. You got to show me with my brother. You got to help me, Lord. And I think this is the conversation they're having. And Jacob's just having trouble accepting that God's with him and everything's going to be all right. So they have this wrestling match, and the most interesting thing happens. Jacob just holds on to the Lord. And I believe this is pre-incarnate Christ. And I think that, you know, obviously God could have just immediately disabled Jacob. I mean, that ain't no problem at all. But this carries on for a reason. I think there's a whole lot here for us to learn from this. But what winds up happening is when the Lord touches a certain part of his hip bone, right where the thigh connects to the hip, somewhere in here, I mean, just becomes somewhat out of joint. I mean, I think he knocked his hip out of socket. That's what I think he did. Which would end the wrestling match pretty quick and make you walk a little funny, you know, if your hip's out of joint.
The Bible tells us there at the end of chapter 2 that to this day, or at least up until the writing of this, the Jews won't even eat that part of the meat when they're preparing meat. That part of the hip, the sinewy part. And I've read somewhere there's some nerves in there, and they won't eat any part of that. Right around where the hip connects to the pelvis in an animal. I don't think it matters what animal. Something clean they're allowed to eat, but they don't eat that part of the meat. They just leave that out. Now that's not commanded in the Bible. That's how this story impacts them. It's just a reminder of what will take place if you wrestle with God. So He'll sure enough put you limping if that's what it takes to get your attention, to get you to trust me. So anyway, so when we close out chapter 32, that's what's going on, and that's the last thing that we read. So we get into chapter 33, and I guess we did back up, but we didn't back up and read. So that's, I guess, my compromise for today. Chapter 33, verse 1, Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men, and he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the 2 handmaids. And he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, Rachel and Joseph hindermost. Now I'm not going to go back through the 11 kids. We've talked about 12 kids, 11 boys. I'm not going to go back through who they are. I mean, we've studied that enough, I think. You can always look back at that if you want to. But just understand there's Bilhah and Zilpah are the handmaidens. They're out front with 4 boys that were had by them. And then Leah and all her boys. And then Rachel, who's just got Joseph. And so he's divided them up. And we'll talk about why in a minute. Verse 3 says, he passed over before them. A lot of people read that wrong. Look at verse 2. It says, he put the handmaids and their children foremost, Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. A lot of people read that wrong. They think that Jacob's back there with Rachel and Joseph and he put all the women in front of him. That's not what he did. He divided them that way, but then he went in front of them. Verse 3, he went first. So he's trying to protect his family and separate them up to where if something goes bad, they can still try to get away. I will say this. I don't think he was going to retreat no matter what. And you may ask me why, and I'll tell you. He spent the night wrestling with God on the other side of the Jacob River. That was the last land barrier between him and Esau. If he had any inclination to run, he'd have waited on that side of the river, let Esau come to him, and if he felt like he was under attack, he at least has that little river there to protect him while he tries to get away. Of course, he's hobbling at this point anyway. He wasn't going to be able to, do too good with him 100% whole. That may be another reason why God did it. Just to show him, look, with you being, not at your best, you're still going to come out of this okay. Because you're not relying on your health to get you through it anyway. And by the way, there's a message in that for today. You're relying on your own health and your own immune system to protect you against viruses and bacteria and different diseases, not just COVID, but different things. You're relying on the wrong thing. Because the God who made you, created you, loves you, and saved you can protect you whether you've got a great immune system or not. If it's His will to do so, He can do whatever He wants to. It don't make any difference. I know some people that trust in their exercise regimen or their particular set of vitamins that they take or how much they spend in insurance or which doctors they have, which specialists they have. You know who I trust in? I trust in Almighty God. And I'll tell you what, it don't make any difference if I've got a good immune system or not. I got a wonderful God, and that's who I'm trusting. So anyhow, that may be another reason he did it. There may have been in this wrestling match, there may have been a conversation. And I'm not trying to add to the Bible. I don't know what was said. I'm just saying there may have been a conversation somewhere in that wrestling match where Jacob's trying to say, look, at my healthiest, at my best, I never was big enough to stand up to my brother. He's a tough guy. He's a hunting type. He's one of them that's really, he's got a lot of athletic ability. He's got all this prowess, and he's just gonna tear me right up. He don't need 400 men. He can whoop me by himself. There may have been a conversation like that in which God says something like this: look, I can cripple you and you still be all right because I am your God. So I don't know that conversation went that way, but I mean I can certainly see that possibility there. But there's no indication he intended to run. By this point, by the time
the wrestling match ends. Jacob had made up his mind, hey look, I'm hobbled now for life. Whatever happens, happens. I'm just going to trust God. And I know that because he crossed the river. And he put nothing between him and Esau. From this point on, he's walking ahead of these women and ahead of these children, and he goes to meet his brother, come what may. And that's the way sometimes we've got to do. We've got to stop worrying about, and believe me, the devil's good at getting us to look at the things we're scared of. The devil's good at making us worry over this or worry over that. You know, it's funny. I've had times in my life where I didn't know how I was going to pay a particular bill. And God will come and find a way to show up just when I need Him to, and that bill's taken care of, and then something else will come up and I'll worry over that. Isn't that silly? When I know the same God who's always brought me through is always going to. So I don't know why we do that, but we do that. We forget about all the things that God has done to prove that He's got it. And He's with us, and He's going to take care of it. And we let the things around us scare us. I think of Peter when he stepped out of the boat, and he asked the Lord, "Hey, can I come to you on the water?" And the Lord said, "Come." And as long as he was looking at Jesus and walking toward Jesus, he was fine. And he walked on the water without any issues or problems at all. But what happened to him? He started focusing on the wind and the waves. Started looking at other things besides Jesus, and what happened? He began to sink, didn't he? See, that's what happens to Christians today. They take their eyes off of Jesus and they start sinking. And then, oh, help me, God! Hey, but God never left you, we left Him. God never took His eyes off you, you took your eyes off Him. And the same God that said, come out on the water, the same God who reached down and grabbed him up out of the water. Said, why did you doubt? Well, Jacob crosses the river and he has no intention of running backwards. Verse 3, he passed over before them in front of his family. And he bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. There was a custom in those days, and it wasn't a Christian, well, there wasn't any Christians, but it wasn't a Jewish custom. It wasn't a Jews yet. This was just a secular custom. If you encountered a king, you bowed yourself to the ground 7 times. So when Jacob does this, this is customary to do to show acquiescence to somebody that you're humbling yourself in front of. So basically he's admitting, you know what, you're my older brother, this is your land, not mine, I'm coming into your property over here. And he bows himself 7 times before his brother as one last way before they come face to face of saying, hey, whatever you do, I'm submitting to it. This is an ultimate act of faith. A lot of us, I'll share this with you. When I was in school, one of my favorite posters they had on the wall. Y'all remember, if you went to school, periodically they'd have posters outside the office where the principal's office is. I know that because I went to the principal's office more than I should have. But they have them down the hallways near the locker banks. I mean, there's always these neat little inspirational posters. There's always one about no pain, no gain in the athletic department. There's always different ones that are inspirational. Knowledge is power. Y'all all seen that one, right? My favorite ever poster at school had a pelican with a frog in its mouth. Who's seen this? Anybody seen this? There's a pelican with a frog in his mouth, and the hands of the frog are coming out of the mouth and are wrapped around the pelican's neck like this. This frog is in the process of being eaten by a pelican. And the caption says, never give up. Now this frog is about to be digested. He's halfway down this thing's throat. The only thing sticking out of his mouth are his hands. But he's got them hands around that neck. He's not going down without a fight. And when you think about that, and you think about how most of us are, if we were going to go and meet against our brother who we think's coming to kill us, hey, he may win, but we're not going down without a fight, are we? Most of us, I dare say, would fight to the last tooth and nail. You know, if you're going, I may be going down, I'm going down swinging, right? That's the way we're taught. That's the way young men are brought up. But notice Jacob's response to Esau. When he finally submitted to God, when he finally understood that what's about to happen is got to be in accordance with God's will and not mine, He surrenders himself to whatever's going to happen, and he bows himself 7 times before Esau. That's not what most of us would do. Let's be honest now. That's not what most of us would do. Win, lose, or draw, we probably wouldn't bow down. And we certainly probably wouldn't do it 7 times. But Esau does. It says he bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Verse 4. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Now I got to tell you, I didn't see that coming. I don't think Jacob saw that coming. The moment he heard there were 400 men headed his way, all hopes of reconciliation had flown from his mind. I don't think he expected this. And if you're reading along and you've been keeping up with the character of Esau, you don't expect this. But most of us read ahead and we knew it was going to happen. But watch this. Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, fell on his neck, kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, Who are those with thee? And he said, The children which God hath graciously given thy servant. Now I don't know, but I have a theory as to why he asked the question. See, Esau had a bunch of wives. We know of at least 3. I don't know how many kids he has, but Jacob's got 12 already. So he probably thought, you know, Jacob wasn't even married the last time I saw him. What are the odds all these are his? See, God had blessed Jacob. So I mean, it was a fair question. Who are all these? These can't be all yours, brother. You haven't even been married as long as I have, and I don't have that many. That's what I think that meant. But anyway, he told him, he said, These are the children which God has graciously given me. Verse 6, Then the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. What I want you to see here is very important for you to understand. I want you to see here that the wives and the children do as Father had done. Because when you're led right, you'll do right. Keep in mind, as they're headed to meet Esau, Jacob has shown that he has the fear that things may not go as he hopes. And the children have seen this. They've watched him divide the company in 5 separate groups for the gift. They've watched him divide up the wives and the children separately. They've watched Father prepare for the worst. And then they watched their father bow down 7 times before what was a potential enemy. And any one of these boys, and I don't know how old they are by this time, I don't know. But I would expect that they're all under 15 anyway. Any one of these could have refused to bow down, or could have acted in defiance, or could have said something not nice. You ever have a kid say something you wish they didn't say? When you get as many as I've got, there used to be a show on TV called Kids Say the Darndest Things. Well, that's true. In fact, I could have founded that show if I'd thought of it first. Seems like kids are always saying stuff I wish they wouldn't say. But his don't do that. His wives and his children follow what they saw him do. And I want you to understand, whether you realize it or not, your children are watching you. And I know you're looking at me now and you're thinking, wait a minute, my kids are grown. It don't matter. It don't matter. Wherever you're at in your life, your kids have not gotten there yet. Isn't it wild how they never catch up to where we're at? Always about 15, 20 years behind us. But they've never been where you're at. So if they're watching you, they'll know how to do when they get there. So whether you get a late start or an early start, remember, your kids are watching and they're learning. You don't think they are. You think, they don't pay me no attention at this stage of my life. Yes, they do. You know how I know? I was watching my daddy the whole time. I was watching my granddaddy up until the day he died. And if I live to be a 16th of what my granddaddy Bates was, I'll be doing okay. If I could just be a fraction of the man my granddaddy was, I'll be doing okay. Your kids are watching. Don't ever forget that. Leave them right. Because even adults need guidance. So they all bowed themselves. Verse 8, and he said, What meanest thou by all this drove which I met? What is all this? Why did I get 5 groups telling me you were behind them? What is all this? He said, these are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. And Esau said, and I love this, he says, I have enough. I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. You know what I read into that? And I know it doesn't say this, but this is what I read into it. God sometimes, and a lot of times, a lot more than you think, He'll work on somebody else somewhere else while He's working on you where you are. I've seen this in my own life. And I won't name anybody, but there was a particular person in my life that I was estranged from for a while for various reasons. And God got a hold of them where they were. He'd been working on me where I'm at. And when I came in contact with that person again, it was wonderful to see all that God had done with them. And I know what He's done with me. See, God will work on people just like He's working on you. We don't think about that. Sometimes the last time we saw somebody, that's all we remember is what we knew of them. I'll give you a couple of examples from Scripture. When Paul and Barnabas split, y'all are aware of this story, right? Paul and Barnabas got in a pretty heated argument over John Mark. Because they had tried to take him with them before on a missionary journey, and John Mark did not stay with them. He quit them. He ran home. I believe John Mark was a little spoiled. His mama had money. We believe the upper room where Jesus had the Last Supper, or the Lord's Supper, excuse me, not the Last Supper. We believe that place where that took place belonged to John Mark's mother. And we believe she came from an affluent family. She had some money. The first church in Jerusalem, they met there frequently. I think that's the house they were at when Peter got arrested. And he got out and he came to the door, and Rhoda answered the door, and Peter's standing there, and they couldn't believe he was there. I think they were at John Mark's mother's house. So John Mark probably grew up with money. And because he grew up with money, he's probably pretty spoiled. But when he went on a journey with Paul and Barnabas, Barnabas being his uncle, he decided, hey, this life ain't for me. I don't like all this camping out in tents and moving town to town and not knowing if you're going to have enough to eat and drink. I grew up always having enough. I don't like this. And he went home. He quit the mission field. Well, the next time they went on a missionary journey, Paul and Barnabas took off together. They agreed to go, and everybody was on board, and everything was fine. But then John Mark came up in the conversation. Barnabas said, well, he's my nephew, and I love him, and I think he's made a change, and I want to take him with us. Paul said, I ain't taking that guy. You can't depend on him. Don't want nobody to go and can't depend on him. What if he quits us again? What if next time we're in dire straits and we really need him? We just can't take that chance. So they parted company. Barnabas took John Mark and went to Cyprus. Paul took Silas and went to Asia Minor. And the point is, sometimes when you have an issue like that and you part company, the devil thinks he's doing some good. He's partying a super team or whatever. He's getting you all upset and getting you in an argument with somebody. And the Lord will work on you and teach you and grow you. And you won't even know He's doing it with someone else. You only know what He's doing with you. Well, we find out later Paul and Barnabas make up, and not only that, John Mark and Paul make up. Because God works on John Mark where he's at, while God works with Paul where he's at. And when they all come back together, they're a benefit to one another. So I think the lesson here, and I want you to get this, please, this is the main point of the night, is that sometimes when you're away from certain people in your family, don't rule them out, don't count them out, don't think they're no good or God's never going to fix them. Sometimes God will restore the situation and you won't even know about it. And then when you come across them, you'll see it in them. Now, I don't know if Esau got saved or not. I don't even know if he's walking with God or not. What I do know is that he's been blessed. He's got plenty. And what he says to his brother Jacob is, I have enough. Keep your stuff. I don't need it. Now, he doesn't say here that God gave it to him, but I'd like to believe that. I'd like to believe that even after all those years, hey, maybe that whole incident with the birthright and the blessing woke him up. Maybe he was like John Mark. He'd been spoiled all those years, and
after separating from his brother, he humbled himself and prayed. I don't know. The Bible don't say. But maybe he had turned it around. Maybe he was living right now. All I can tell you is he's not greedy. He looks at his brother. He says, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you got. I don't need it. Verse 10, Jacob said, Nay, but I pray thee, if I found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. Jacob says, you know what? It's worth it to me to give you this just to see the power of God in our relationship. The fact that I'm able to hug you and kiss you and cry with you and us, you know, not be mad at one another. Hey, it's worth it to me. It's just like seeing God to me. What Jacob's saying is, I see the power of God in this restoration. And I want you to have this gift. At this point, the gift becomes like a tithe or offering. At this point, what Jacob's trying to give his brother, it's just like giving it to God. It's saying, you know what? God has blessed me. He's shown up and He's always been there when I need Him. And I want to give this to you. So now we got a gift nobody seems to want. Esau says, I don't need it. And Jacob says, I don't need it either. I want you to have it. You ever have that happen? I've had that happen. I've tried to give somebody something. I say, I don't need it. I don't want it. And anyway. My favorite one's arguing over who's going to pay for the check. That's my favorite one. But anyhow, Jacob says, look, if I found grace in your sight, take this from my hand, because it's as though I had seen the face of God. Verse 11, take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. He said, look, I got enough too. It's not hurting me to give you this, because God has blessed me, and I have it, and I want to give it. I love people like that. I love that I'm in a church like that. People here realize that what they have belongs to God. God gave it to them, and they're just so willing to give and to help. I've watched people in this church help all manner of different people from all walks of life. Give food drives, give baby clothes, give teething rings, diapers, and wipes. I've watched people in this church go out of their way to give like this. And so I love that this example is here, and I love that we have a church that lives by this example. Verse 12, he said, let us take our journey, let us go, and I will go before thee. And he said unto him, my Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks and herds with young are with me, and if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Now that's not complicated. He just says, look, you got 400 men that are going to get tired of waiting on us, because you guys don't have anything slowing you down. We've got little kids, and we've got new baby cows, and we got all this. We're going to take our time, so don't wait on us. I think Jacob was just happy to know that nobody wants to kill him, and he's ready to relax. Listen, he was driven pretty hard to this point running from Laban. Now he finds out he don't have to fight with Esau. Finally, he gets to just relax and enjoy a little bit of what God has blessed him with. So he says, look, I don't want you to wait on me. We're going to be slow. He says, verse 14, he says, let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure until I come unto my Lord, unto Seir. And Esau said, let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, what needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. Let me explain that. Esau says, look, if you insist on us not going together, let me at least leave you some security. I got these 400 men, I can spare some. I'll leave you a security detail. And you know what I think Jacob finally realized? He didn't need anybody but God. He didn't need a security detail, and he wasn't worried about any enemies, because I think Jacob realized if God could heal the relationship between him and Esau, God could handle anything. I think this is the miracle Jacob needed in his life. So he says, look, I don't need it. Thank you, but I don't need it. Verse 16, so Esau returned that day on his way unto Seir, and for them that may not remember, Seir is a mountain in Edom near Jordan, not too far from where Petra is. It may have actually been there, but in that region, just to the east of the Jordan River. Verse 17, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth. Now, I'm not going to be long-winded on this, but I want you to know a little bit about Succoth. Succoth is on the east side of the Jordan River, south of Mount Seir, well, yeah, just beyond Mount Seir. Is to the east of Shechem. All you really need to know about this is it's a really fertile place.
And he's got a lot of cattle and sheep and goats and things that need to eat. So when he goes there, that's why he stays so long. It's basically, it's close enough to the river and flat enough and green enough. It's prairie is what it is. So when he gets there, just keep in mind he's got his animals in mind. And he built a house there. He stays a while. And he made booths for his cattle. I'm assuming those are some type of barn. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth, because Succoth means booth. And he stays there for a while. We don't know how long. But remember, God had wanted him back in the promised land. At some point he's got to cross the Jordan River. It may be that he wanted to wait until the baby cows and sheep and goats are a little older. Maybe he didn't want to try to cross a river that big with those babies. But for whatever reason, he stays in Succoth for a while, and I'm going to close these next 3 little verses. I'm going to show you some important things, and we're through. Jacob came to Shalom, a city of Shechem. Shalom is another way of saying Salom, which means peace. Apparently, it was a small suburb of Shechem. Shechem is an important place, and we're going to talk a whole lot about Shechem next week. I'm not going to get into it tonight, but just keep in mind Shechem and Sychar are about the same place. This is where Jacob's well is going to be built, and where later Jesus meets the woman at the well in John chapter 4. This is the same place, the same ground. If you remember that story, you remember that that's where Jesus meets her at. It's at Jacob's well. And she says, our forefathers built this well. And they say that we're supposed to worship here, and you people say it's supposed to be in Jerusalem. And anyway, you remember the conversation. We're not going to go there tonight. We'll talk about it next week. But Jacob gets there, and this is the land of Canaan. This is where he was supposed to be. When he came from Padan Aram, he pitched his tent before the city, and he bought a parcel of the field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money, and he erected there an altar and called it El Ohi Israel. I don't remember what that means. I don't even have a note. It's got something to do with God and Israel, but I don't remember. If somebody's got a note, you can share that.
God, the God of Israel.
Say it again.
God, the God of Israel.
God, the God of Israel. Sounds right. I knew it was something like that. Anyway, he built an altar and named it after God, the God of Israel. He also builds there a well. We're not going to talk about that tonight. What I want you to know is this long journey has ended with Jacob being back where he's supposed to be. He's back in Israel. And I want to tell you just one more little thing real quick and we're through. Where he's at now in Shechem there's a beautiful valley there. And I didn't get to go see it because I didn't get to go to Israel yet. But I've read a lot about it. And this valley's got a natural amphitheater. I've told you before, you got Mount Gerizim on this side, you got Mount Ebal on this side. And you can stand on either one of them mountains and you can shout down that mountain, and the acoustics of it all, you can hear across that valley. Shechem was a very interesting place. That whole area is pretty interesting. Samaria is built there later, the capital of northern Israel. But anyway, I don't want to get into all that. The point is he's home, and he's in a very holy place. Place we're going to talk about more next week. But the lesson for tonight is what I hope you'll get out of this. First of all, that we be examples to those that are watching us. And second of all, remember that sometimes when you find yourself separated from somebody else, God works on both parties. God will bring people back to restore them. But sometimes He's got to get you away from one another. And I've noticed this in relationships, and I'm through. I just want you to hear this. You can shut that off. I've noticed this in relationships.